by Brevin Gibson, and then The Pledge by Jocelyn.
Heavenly Father, thank you we could all be here today. Thank you we were all able to get here safely. Please us to have a good time tonight. Please us to learn what we need to here. In Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Will the audience please rise?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you guys so much. I guess now I'll turn the time over to Sister Schultz. Our closing prayer will be by Brother Meyer.
Right. We're so excited to have you here today. And if somebody can hand me my green folder, we'll get started. Thank you. Okay. Well, first of all, who is excited to be here tonight? Me. Yeah, I heard somebody say me. Okay. And who's ready to learn something new about how to maintain freedom in our country? Yeah. Okay, and notice I said something new because I know we all know something about how to maintain freedom. First, I'm going to just tell you again, my name is Mary Black, and I am so excited to be here tonight. And I'm so excited to have each one of you here tonight because I know you could be home watching Tangled or something. So I want to thank each one of you for being here. So would you give yourself a hand? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, good. All right. Well, tonight we are going to, I just want to tell you what this class is going to be like. I hope we have fun. I want to make new friends. Okay, you kids are excited to have fun, right? Yeah. Hope we make new friends or just get to see the friends that we already know. And we're going to have some guest presenters, and I'll tell you about our guest presenter for tonight in just a few minutes. I'm so excited. And you're going to have presentations by me. We're also going to have some presentations by you. But nobody's going to be forced to do any presentations, okay? Okay, but you will have the opportunity to practice answering questions that people ask, to practice explaining these principles that we'll be learning. And I think that this is going to be a great experience. Okay, so we're going to study some principles of the Constitution. And not only do we want to understand them better, but we also want to understand why they work. Because a lot of people understand the Constitution, don't they? But they say, we'll throw it out because they don't understand why it works, why it's has created the prosperity that we have in this country, why Americans are even with all the economic downturns that we've had, why Americans still give the most of any country in the world. It's because of the way our country is set up. It has created a whole system, and we're gonna work on understanding how and why, how it works and why. I would like also every one of us to gain greater confidence and greater ability to share what we have, what we are learning, like I just said. I also want to help you apply these principles in your life. And we'll be talking about how, the principles that work for good government for our nation also work for good government in our home, in our business, in self-governing, governing ourselves. You have to tweak them a little bit, and some of them don't exactly work, but everything, it's applicable to our real life. So we're going to be learning some of that tonight. Okay, some of you want to know is it okay if I tell you a little bit about myself? Okay. Okay. I have a degree in music education, so why am I standing here? Notice my music stand. And I also have a lot of study in educational psychology, in a lot of a master's, and a lot in political economy, which is just human nature, why people do the things that they do, and why social people work together in certain ways. But the most important things that I have learned have been in my home. Raising up 6 amazing children, they told me to tell you they were amazing, and homeschooling them for a little over about 30 years. Depends upon how you start counting. And they also told me to tell you that they are so amazing because each one of them has 10 toes. You weren't here. That was one of my children. It's not here tonight. Okay. Okay. He thought, anyway. So I also really feel inspired. I really feel like it's important to help people learn freedom of the mind. Because when even in a political system that is designed to be free, even in America where we still have a lot of freedoms, a lot of people are in slavery because their minds are in slavery. They don't think they can move beyond this point. And so I have a lot of interest in that and just how that works and how to help people and how people learn and what makes them tick and how they learn best. And how to free our minds so that we can learn the things that are necessary to free ourselves physically, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. Okay, whenever I do classes, I always have rules. And I started these when I was teaching like 3 to 12-year-olds, little summer music camp classes. And I've adjusted them just a little bit, but one of my rules is be present. Okay, so that means when you're here, please be here. And if your mind gets lost, if your mind starts wandering off into who knows where, just invite it to come back. And okay, so I have to qualify this though, because if your mind starts going to what are you going to wear tomorrow, what are you going to eat when you get home, those kind of things, then I ask you to pull it back. But my objective here is that the Spirit will be here. And when that Spirit is here, that Spirit of truth is here, it will teach you things. It will teach you how to apply what we're learning. It will teach you what to do with it in your life, or who needs to hear just a little comment or things like that. And so if you get those kind of things, it's okay if your mind goes for a little minute while you write it down. Okay? So feel free to write it down. And I hope everybody brought paper and pens. If not, the student council has paper and pens for everyone, or for whoever needs them. Okay, next rule is respect. What does that mean? One of you ladies on the front row, what does it mean to respect other people? Does it mean to pull their hair? No. Does it mean to punch them when you get mad at them? No. What does it mean? Maybe somebody a little further back can help. What does it mean when we say in this class, in this room, we're going to have respect for the class?
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, did one of you raise your hand? Cassidy? Okay, thank you.
It's listening to and like actually listening to, not just hearing, but actually listening to their thoughts and ideas and thinking about them. And then as a person, not just thinking of something they've done, but thinking about who they are.
Thank you. That's a great idea. Sure. Give both of them a round of applause, because when you're doing this, you're doing what you would like somebody to do for you, huh? Okay. Yeah, that is showing respect. And we're going to be breaking up into some groups during this class and sharing our feelings about some of the things that we'll be teaching. And so I invite you while you're here to be respectful to each other, and maybe even while you're not here. Okay, the next one is you guys know about that one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's somebody on the front row who knows.
Manage communication devices.
What does that mean? That means somebody better get my cell phone out of my purse and put it on silent. Okay. So when you walk in the door, just put your phones on silent, or at least on vibrate. And also, if you get a really important text or a really important call, please go out to take care of it, and instead of interrupting people. Okay? All right. So are we all good with these? Any questions? Everybody, we're good with those? Okay. Okay. Now I have a question for you. And this, if you would get out your paper and your pencils, then I'm going to give you a few minutes to write on this subject. And here's what the question is. We're going to make you think right at the beginning here. Okay. Now sometimes you go into a class and you hear, in fact I ask sometimes in a class, why are you here? And I'm not going to let you share that right now, but I'm going to let you write down. But before you start, I want to change that question just a little bit. So you're ready for this? I'll have them pass out paper in just a second, okay? Not why are you here, but what circumstances in your life have happened that brought you step by step by step until you are here in Rigby Library tonight at 7:20, 7:18, if that clock is right, on January 22nd, 2014, to learn about the 28 principles that are good principles of good government and of the Constitution. What brought you here? What step-by-step things led you to this point? So, the student council is going to pass out paper and pencils if you need them. Everybody else, you can go ahead and start writing. Thank you. You'll have about 4 minutes. Okay, we've got about 30 more seconds. Okay, finish up your sentence. Stop, stop, stop. Okay. Now it's your turn to talk. Would someone like to share why you're here, what brought you here? Want to come up? Because it's being recorded and it only records this part. Thank you.
This all started back in September with me, and it started with the Kimber Academy about learning more about the Founding Fathers and learning more about self-government and what the Kimber Academy is based on. But I came here tonight to learn more about the Constitution and 28 principles, because before this, I didn't know there was 28 principles. So I'm kind of naive to this, and didn't pay attention in school when I was a kid. So I've come here to learn more about the 28 principles and how Heavenly Father had his hand in the role of the Constitution and the founding of this country.
Thank you. Give a round of applause. Right. Who learned about the 28 principles when they were in school?
I don't feel so bad now.
Okay, it wasn't because you didn't pay attention, was it? No, it was because, why was it? Why was it you didn't learn about the 28 principles in school?
We were taught about the select few of the presidents in U.S. history, but the Constitution was there, but it wasn't there.
Okay,
That was back in the 80s.
the 80s. You're young. Well, they didn't teach about the Constitution when we were there either. Okay, anybody else want to share?
They did in Arizona when I went to school, but that was a long time ago. We had to pass a test on the Constitution before we could go into high school.
Wow. Wow, that's exciting. Good, and do you remember what you learned?
Well, just basically, it was simplified because we were only in the 8th grade.
Okay. Okay, well, that was a few years ago.
Yeah, it was. It was the 50s.
The 50s, yeah. And, but it's kind of gotten phased out, hasn't it? And that's why we're here, because we want to learn these principles, but they're not teaching them in the schools, not the public schools anyway right now. Okay, anybody else want to share? Before you got to come up. Would you mind coming up here, please? And you can get in line, Travis. Okay. Thanks, DeBar.
Well, I just wrote down what came to me through the Spirit, and this is what I wrote. Because civilization in general has forgotten God in their everyday lives, and as a result, we have allowed government to teach humanism in the public sector school and take God out of the public place.
Wow, thank you. Okay,
I want to know more how to change that.
okay. Would you like to teach us a little bit more about what humanism? I'll talk to you afterwards. Not because you're bad. Okay, Travis, come and share with us.
I work road construction, so I spend a lot of time driving a lot of distance, and I ran into a podcast from the Free Capitalist, and he started teaching principles, and he was merging how you break down principles into real life situations, and it was really challenging my premise as to how you do that, how you lock principles into decision making, and through his he had a bunch of them, and I mean we just listened to him 24/7 for about I would say just about 6 months. I mean that's just about all I listened to where almost his thoughts and his ideas as he went was almost my ideas and my thoughts. I just listened to it that often, and then I shared those ideas with some of my brothers and a brother-in-law who he really got into it, listening to it as well. He was an over-the-road truck driver, and so that we kind of got the thing where we'd just get an idea and we'd just call each other and we'd say, okay, hey, we'd be talking for a minute, and then if something come up we had to go, we say, oh, we just got to go, boom, and it's over. But we could we could have this quick communication anytime this thought came, and we said, have you thought about this? How does this work? And we just bounce it off of each other, and it was really cool, and it just made your brain just about explode, going, this just totally makes sense. And it was just going, this isn't being taught anywhere. Why is it? And so it almost brought me to the point of being angry, going, this is just messed up. This is good stuff. This is what we all need to know. This is how we make decisions, good decisions. And so since then, I've just been looking at for other ways to teach that and to learn those and to see people who are like-minded. So I've been able to see constitutional classes and studies and things like that, but none of them really broke down into the principles other than just, here's the Constitution, this is how it works, and going through reading the Constitution. But we were missing the element of saying, these are constitutional principles. How do you tie them to your decision-making process? Why are those principles of Constitution important? Other than, hey, there was, a bunch of really, really smart men, a long time ago that came up with a great idea. It's like hard to defend something like that. But when you learn principles and you learn why they used those, then you fight tooth and nail to keep principles based and tying those into the way, because it's not the Constitution, it's that they use principles to make decisions. And they say, these are principles, and they put it in the form of the Constitution. So the Constitution, to me, I get a little bit sideways a little bit with that the Constitution is important, but it's because of the principle based is why the Constitution is important. So anyway, that's how it came. So technology in a large part really is why I was able to feed, have a feeding frenzy, I guess, on principles.
All right. That was awesome. And that's one of the things that, like I said, that I would like all of us to learn while we're here in this class is what the principles are and how to apply them and why. Thank you. You said that so well. In fact, you said something in the last class that made me, when I was thinking about this class and thinking about principles of the Constitution, I gave it a subtitle. And my subtitle is A Virtuous and Moral People. And that, you inspired that before, talking about how the Constitution doesn't work unless we are virtuous and moral. So thank you, thank you. We'll have more time to discuss and to share in a little while. But right now, I want to introduce somebody who I really love. And I met this person. It's not my spouse, he's right there. But somebody I met actually even before I met my spouse, because we were in a choir at BYU in college. We were in a choir together, BYU a cappella choir. I won't even tell you how many years ago, right? And we went on tour to Spain, France, and Switzerland in 1976. And we all wore little flags because it was the bicentennial year. And we had a great time, and she was, I think at the time you were engaged to this incredible clarinetist, and she was a beautiful flautist, and okay, well, a little after, because I knew you married David Berger.
That's right.
And then I kind of lost track of them. Then when we moved to Idaho Falls, we heard this name, David Berger. And I'm like, I think I know that name. I think I know his wife. And I went to her at one of the symphony things or something backstage, and I said, Jolene Goodwin! And that's her maiden name.
Mary Weaver!
Anyway, but I just feel so privileged to know Jolene Goodwin, and she has, Jolene Berger. I'm so grateful that we got back together, and she is a precinct chairman in Idaho Falls. She ran for city council, and she has so much to offer, and she is a person who acts according to her beliefs and who believes in truth, and she follows what she believes in. And now we're going to let her come and share with us some fun things.
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to her, so let's hear
Okay.
Okay, I'll keep
Keep
it
the
there.
mic for it, okay.
Okay, well, Mary is so kind to me. Thank you so much, Mary. I didn't know Mary very well until I was traipsing around the countryside in I think it was Switzerland. And she said, do you want to come with me? And we went through and spent the day, and I have a picture of her in the back in the backwoods of a Swiss city. I'm not sure which one. Oh, I think it was Bern where we were, and that was a great time. And her introduction of me is true, and it is my goal. It was my goal in my campaign for city council to operate under principles rather than, I discovered most people operate under not offending a person that they know really well. I remember talking to someone and I said, well, I'm thinking of running against so-and-so for city council, and she said, oh, well, I don't think I could support you against her because I know her so well. And I thought, well, that's interesting because she doesn't have the principles that I do, and she doesn't have the principles that you do either. She doesn't believe in those, so why would you do that? And so I thought that was very interesting. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from running for city council, and I want to share a little bit of it with you. A couple of things were testimony builders. One, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do this because it's kind of scary. And you put yourself out there for a lot of criticism, I found out. And not only that, but they twist your words. And so people who don't know you find or think that you said something when you didn't really say that. And that made me angry. And it was upsetting, but I've discovered that that's the way it is. Let's see, but I wanted to tell you what came into my mind when I was fasting and praying about the decision whether to do that or not. It was during General Conference. And I had been studying fantastic books. My book is very old, but it's very good and well worn. And but I had studied things like this ever since. Oh, you have that same edition. Well, I noticed it was different from the newer one. Anyway, I've been studying these principles ever since I was about 5 years old, when my dad, who was bishop, when my dad was bishop in Austin, Texas is where I grew up. I was a Southerner for a while, and I learned about Cleon Skousen because he came to talk to us, and I was just so little. But I knew that there was an important book on my dad's shelves after Brother Skousen came, and it was called not the 5,000 Year League. Yeah, it was the Naked Communist. And I knew that was important. I did not know why, but I knew. Anyway, from that time on, I looked for things by Brother Skousen, and when I went to BYU, I found all the religion classes that I could take from him. I was one of the first people who tried out his course, Treasures of the Book of Mormon. Have any of you been through that book, the Treasures of the Book of Mormon course? Okay, so he was the one who wrote that, and as he wrote that textbook, each night we'd get it the next day in class as assignments, and so I got a lot of his study and research about government, and learned about things he did when he was chief of police in Salt Lake City by taking his religion classes, and that was fantastic. I think I lost my train of thought. Let's see. Oh yes, my little personal revelation was, Jolene, I think you know some of the principles of government that a lot of the other people who are running for city council don't know, and that's one of the reasons you should do it. So I did do it, and I also found that there were times when the Lord helped me. I wasn't expecting it. I'll tell you one in particular. It was kind of a last-minute decision, and a lot of the requirements were thrown at me, and I didn't have a lot of time. And there was a big packet of regulations and rules and all this kind of stuff that I was supposed to read, and I didn't read it really carefully, and I found out that I had to have something due with my treasurer's name on it and my signature and all this kind of stuff, and it was due. And I just barely had asked the treasurer to say yes, and he was the one who said, well, Jolene, are you sure you want to do this? And I said, well, yeah, I am sure. Well, I said, you don't have to feel an obligation to help me if you don't want to. He says, well, I said, if you don't feel it's right. He says, well, it's right, I just don't know if I want to do it. And that was basically what the Lord showed me, because as we were trying to get this turned in, I was over at his house, and he signed it, and I signed it, and I was ready to take it down to the city council, to the offices, and I think I had about an hour. And then I realized as I got in the car and was headed down there that something was missing. He hadn't filled in something about his station in life or his experience or something. And I raced home and realized that I had said goodbye to him just as he had headed out to go to his service in the temple. And there was no way, I mean, I was in my jeans and wasn't dressed very well. There was no way I was going to be able to go and find him at the temple if I couldn't catch him. So I ran home and hurried and dialed his number because I didn't have my cell phone. And he had left. Oh dear, what am I going to do? Oh dear. And I had promised the Lord, I said, you know, I'm doing this kind of as a leap of faith, and I'm sort of like stepping out into the dark, not knowing beforehand what I should do, as Nephi said. You guys know that scripture? Okay, good. And I expect you to put a really big boulder in the way if it's not right. And I said to the Lord, I said, I don't know what to do now. What should I do? Well, the only thing you can do is hurry down in your car to the temple parking lot and see if you can catch them. Well, there's two sides of the temple, and I just knew that I was going to miss them, because for sure they'd park on one side and would have already walked in before I could catch them. So I just prayed, if this is the boulder, I will accept it. Well, I hurried down in my car without speeding, hopefully, and no sooner had I got into the parking lot and I saw this gentleman and his wife getting out of their car and heading up the sidewalk, and I ran and caught them and got the signature and everything filled out, and that was the first testimony to me that the Lord was helping me, even though I didn't win. And I've had to grapple with that a little bit. I've decided that the Lord helps us when we ask for it. And He may have a different purpose than we think we see. And I've decided that must be the case in my situation. Another instance that I'd like to tell you about when I was running was where I was expected to be at Mark Richardson's at his radio show for his I think it was for Probing America on his Saturday morning show, and he was going to let me run an ad, and I hadn't written it out yet, and he was going to charge me twice what I had done originally because it was going to be longer than the first one. I don't know if any of you heard it or not, but I hadn't written it, and I was expected to be on the air in just like 5 minutes, and I was talking to my campaign manager, well, what do you suggest that I say, trying to drive and write some of these notes down at the same time, and I got all these notes down, and it kind of looked like a score when sometimes you go to a musical and the conductor says, well, now we're going to skip from A to B, and we're going to delete all this, and you have to draw notes all over your music, and that's exactly what it looked like. I had a sheet of paper, and there were notes all over it, and crossed out, and this, and I tell you, the Lord was with me when I recorded that ad, because it went so smoothly. I was just able to just see the order in which it was supposed to go, and I witnessed to you that the Lord was helping me. And so I have, in part of my presentation tonight, one of the precepts is that in order to have a good system of government, we need to have virtuous leaders. That's the third principle. Well, I better start at the beginning first, but when we get to the third principle, I will tell you again that the Lord expects people to know, so that when you are faced with maybe the situation when you decide to serve your country, or in some way do something similar, that the Lord does expect us to serve our country and to rise to the principles that He's given us. And so with that, I'd like to start. This is one of my favorite subjects. I was asked if I would start on the first 3 principles, and I discovered that when I did the research, I really have covered the first 4. But I'd like to go through them quickly. The very first principle that is mentioned in Cleon Skousen's book, The 5,000-Year Leap, which was written to show how the Founding Fathers researched civilizations. They read de Montesquieu, they read Blackstone, they read John Locke, they read the Bible, they read, they studied civilizations, they read Polybius, they read Cicero, they read Plato's Republic, they read all those famous things. And they wrote down the principles that work. And that's what I first said in the very first debate that I attended, was that I would be governing, or whatever I was asked to do, on these principles mentioned in this book that work. They work for a prosperous society, they work for a happy society, they work for justice and equity among all men, and they're great. So the very first principle I want to talk to you about is the fact that the only reliable basis for sound government and just human relations is natural law. So first of all, we have to decide what natural law is. Oh, before I go into that, let me read you a really good quote. This is Thomas Jefferson, and I'm so proud of you, all of you, for being here, and anyone who studies the principles of good governing, because it's the only thing that will help to keep a nation from being in slavery. Here's what Thomas Jefferson said. He says, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free, this is from page 31 if you want to follow it, and if you want to find it when you get home, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. So sometimes I think well, probably all the time I did this, I think we elect our public servants and we say, well, they'll take care of it. They'll do it. We send them to office and then give them a responsibility. But that's not the way to do it. It's our job to continue to be educated and to keep tabs on them, the way they vote and don't vote, talk to them, call them up, and make sure that they adhere to the principles that you elected them for. He goes on to say, preach a crusade against ignorance. Establish and improve the law for educating the common people. Let our countrymen know that the people alone can protect us against these evils of misgovernment. So it really is incumbent upon all of us. And you know, I really think everyone should run for an office just because it makes you care. It makes you look up the principles that you would stand for. And one of my guiding examples was a famous prophet named Joseph Smith, who was mayor of Nauvoo, and a black man came to him, and maybe you folks know about this. He came to him and said, would you please, he'd been convicted of stealing someone's horse, would you please get me off of this? let me out of this. I was just stealing the horse because my son is a slave in whatever state it was at that time. And I was trying to buy his freedom. Don't you think that's a good thing? Well, Joseph, what do you think Joseph Smith said? Looks like some of you know. What do you think he said? What would you say? It looks like you're trying to help this man, and this is what a lot of people who are in government do. They say, well, let's help the people. Let's help this man. He said, yes, I understand, and he says, but I'm the administrator of law. We rule by law. The law says you may not steal. There's a punishment for stealing. And so he said, I feel sorry about your son. And so what did Joseph Smith do? He said, here, take my horse. Take my horse and sell it and buy your son's freedom. But you must still serve the sentence for stealing. Does that sound harsh to you? What do you think about that? Did you want?
Well, I think he should be punished for stealing, but then the rest of us must be merciful.
Mercy and justice always goes together, and I think that's one thing that the Founding Fathers knew also. Okay, the first principle is the only reliable basis for sound government is natural law. So what is natural law? What did the Founding Fathers think natural law was? Do you want to guess? Do some of you know? What's that? Oh, no. That's exactly right. The Founding Fathers thought that the natural law came from looking at our beautifully created world and knowing that there was a creator. And knowing that he had mandates and he had laws, like for instance the law of gravity, that something would drop well, that's a natural law of physics. Well, they believed that we had a creator, that we were accountable to him, and that all laws that would make us happy and prosperous as a society would be according to his mandates. And so they thought that the Bible was really important. And they thought that natural law is the same thing as the fact that if Heavenly Father or God, in their case, they didn't know much about his physical appearance, but they knew there was a creator. And they knew that he must have some intelligence. And if he created you and me, then we must have some intelligence also. And our intelligence was akin to his. So that's the first thing that they knew, was that our intelligence would be somewhat like God's, and that we must make our intelligence conform to his intelligence. And so they reasoned that our conduct must be in harmony with a supreme creator of the universe. And so we would have to be in harmony with the laws that the creator established. So their job was to figure out what those laws were. And those are the things that they called natural law. One of the greatest people that the Founding Fathers studied was Cicero. And his real name is Marcus Tullius Cicero. And he wrote quite a bit about natural law. And he says that it's right conduct, and we must adhere to the love of God and the love of mankind. So that's basically the two things that, let's see, did we have any chalk? I didn't bring mine. Okay, I'll use this. Basically, the two things that comprise natural law are love of God and love of men. So basically, he said, if we're going to talk about natural law, we need to basically follow the laws of God, and then we need to love mankind. And let me read something to you. I have discovered that there are many things that are not taught in school. I have 32 pages that I've collected of quotes of the Founding Fathers where they felt like that God's law was preeminent. I have 32 pages of quotes from people all the way back from Christopher Columbus up to Ronald Reagan. And the Founding Fathers knew that natural law and God's law was the most important thing. Noah Webster said, from my quotes, let me find this, he said, the duties of men are summarily comprised in the 10 Commandments. Okay, so that would be the love of God. I have my poster here, the 10 Commandments. And he says, comprised in the 10 Commandments, consisting of 2 tables. Okay, so we have 2 tables. One is the duties which we owe immediately to God, and the other is the duties which we owe to our fellow men. So basically, if we follow these gods, we're doing natural law, which is the love of God and the love of mankind. Okay, so I'm going to just put this in here now. So that's a summation of natural law. And in the interest of time, I'd like to go on to the second principle, which is basically that people must remain virtuous and morally strong. And so I'd like to give you a quote from this great book, page 49, if you want to find it. It's by Benjamin Franklin. And he says, only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. Do you remember what he said to the lady after he came out of the Constitutional Convention? And she said, what have we got? And he said, Madam, we have a republic if you can keep it. And it all depended upon the virtuousness of the people. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. And I have a little example about this. Idaho Falls just passed an ordinance that we have to make sure that our sidewalks are shoveled off within 24 hours. Well, if we were truly loving our fellow men and following principles of righteousness and good governing of ourselves, we wouldn't need something like that. But as long as we're not going to do that, then I guess we need to have it enshrined in law. We need more and more laws. And I think maybe if you'll look at it, you could see that we have 3,000 of pages in the Obamacare law that we've just embraced, some of us. So he says that we have to remain virtuous. Okay, let me read you also something that George Washington said. He says, he praised the American Constitution as the palladium of human rights, and he pointed out that it could survive only so long as there shall remain any virtue in the body of the people. So the second principle is that the people have to remain virtuous, or we cannot keep our freedoms. That's so important. Let's see. Also, he said, let's see. This is from Gordon S. Wood, who is a modern student of government. He says, in a republic, however, each man must somehow be persuaded to submerge his personal wants into the good of the whole. This willingness of the individual to sacrifice his private interests for the good of the community, such patriotism or love of country, the 18th century termed public virtue. Okay, so that's public virtue. The 18th century mind was thoroughly convinced that a popularly based government cannot be supported without virtue. Okay, so we have to remain virtuous. So number one, we have to abide by natural law, which is love of God and love of men. Number two, as a people, we have to remain virtuous. And the people of the 18th century, they thought that public virtue was basically the golden rule. To do unto others as you would be done by, as you would have others do unto you. So that's what they decided was public virtue. And let me read to you what James Madison said about this. He says, is there no virtue among us? If there be not, we are in a wretched situation. No theoretical checks, no form of government can render us secure. To suppose that any form of government will secure liberty or happiness without any virtue in the people is a chimerical idea. If there be sufficient virtue and intelligence in the community, it will be exercised in the selection of these men, so that we do not depend upon their virtue or put confidence in our rulers, but in the people who are to choose them. So if you don't have people who are virtuous, you'll never have virtuous leaders, which is the third principle, but I won't go there yet because I still want to read something else that they said, that they thought that it should be taught in the homes and in the schools and in the churches. Did you know that Abraham Lincoln said that the Constitution should be preached from every pulpit? I don't have that quote. I don't know where that quote is. It's in here somewhere. But he thought that all this needed to be taught. Let me read you something that I have found from Thomas Jefferson about this. He said, no nation has ever existed or been governed without religion, nor can be. And John Adams, we know, said our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. You know, I got called out on this when I used that quote in my debates, and I didn't have it in front of me, so I was nervous that I was saying it right, but I said it right. And somebody said, no, it's not moral and religious. It was moral and virtuous. But he didn't say that. He said, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. So not only did they think of us needing virtue, but we had to be religious as well. I thought that was very interesting. Let me tell you a story about this right now. I just today had an experience that will illustrate how we have to be a moral and religious people. I happen to believe, from all the research that I've done, that the smart meters that will be forced on us by a government that hasn't studied them quite yet thoroughly are actually not only injurious to our health, but I believe that they're a breach of the Fourth Amendment, which was guaranteeing our privacy against unwarranted search and seizures. And they can not only get a lot of information about the way we live our lives and what electrical appliances we're using, but they're also harmful to our health. And there are some people who are very, very harmed to the point where they cannot even come in a building such as this if it has a Wi-Fi attachment or all those kinds of things. And there are people who have to sleep in their cars because they can't sleep. They have nosebleeds, they have heart palpitations, insomnia, they feel jittery, and there's been blood studies that have shown that all blood is affected by the radiation from, or the electromagnetic frequencies. Now, whether you believe that or not isn't really the point. The point is the government would be forcing that on us without our choice. And if I believe it's a health hazard, I should have a choice. I should be able to choose whether I would like to have that kind of a meter on my house to measure my electricity consumption. So there's a really good DVD that's been made. It's called Take Back Your Power by Josh Del Sol. And part of our group decided that we would buy it and donate it to our library. So a lady went to the library and said, I'd like you to put this out for circulation. So the lady said, oh yes, I'll give it to the person who's responsible. And so she said, okay. So she went back in a week and asked if it was in circulation yet, and she said, oh no, we lost it. And it was supposed to show the health effects and the privacy concerns and all the problems with the smart meters. Well, then she just said, well, if they truly did lose it, then I'll pay the money and I'll give them another copy. So she went to the library and gave them the second copy. So she went out of town and she asked me to check on that while she was gone. So I went to the library today and I said, were you able to get that video or that DVD into circulation? And she said, oh yes, we have that. We have 2 copies of it now. I said, oh, you do? Oh, you lost one. She said, oh, well, we can't put that into circulation yet because, well, we have to have an opposing view first to put into circulation. Yeah, isn't that interesting? So number one, she's not being honest, which isn't virtuous. And isn't there something about...
You're so nice.
What's that?
You're so nice.
Well, I'm trying to be. Anyway, yeah, so number one, that's an abridgment of freedom of speech, and number two, she lied. And so I think that's very interesting. So if you don't have a virtuous people, you cannot have a free society, and so people cannot get their hands on that information now until we can clear up this little problem. So there's a good example of how our society here, even in our area, is not virtuous. Okay, the third principle is to elect virtuous leaders. And only a virtuous people can elect virtuous leaders because they can only tell what virtuosity is, or righteousness, or goodness. Let me read you what Benjamin Franklin said about this. He says, we have to have wise and good men. And he said, I think with you that nothing is of more importance for the public weal than to form and train up youth. That's why it's so great that you've got this great thing going here. This is Benjamin Franklin. In wisdom and virtue, wise and good men are, in my opinion, the strength of the state, more so than riches or arms. I think also that general virtue is more probably to be expected and obtained from the education of youth than from the exhortations of adult persons. Bad habits and vices of the mind, being like diseases of the body, are more easily prevented in youth than cured in adults. I think, moreover, that talents for the education of youth are the gift of God, and that he on whom they are bestowed, whenever a way is open for the use of them, is as strongly called, so you guys are called to the work, is as strongly called as if he had heard a voice from heaven. Can you imagine that? Do you learn that kind of thing in school? You don't. I remember as a girl growing up in Texas that in 5th grade was when they stopped having prayers. But up to that point, I was the only LDS person. I happened to be LDS. I imagine there were a lot of Christians at that time. I was the only LDS person, however. But our teachers asked us each day to write a blessing and to say it before we went to lunch. I can remember that we would have one student from the class stand up and say a blessing on lunch before we went to the cafeteria. And I also remember in 5th grade when they stopped that. Do you remember that, Mary, by chance? Yeah, that was in Texas. That's, by the way, the same state that Madeline Murray O'Hare was in when she fought that and won that case. So I thought that was really interesting. Okay, Samuel Adams was known as a great patriot, and probably more then than he is now. He said this. He said, let's see if I've got it right. But neither the wisest constitution nor the wisest laws will secure the liberty and happiness of a people whose manners are universally corrupt. He therefore is the truest friend to the liberty of his country, who tries most to promote its virtue, and who, so far as his power and influence extend, will not suffer a man to be chosen into any office of power and trust who is not a wise and virtuous man. So that was his first thing that he said we should elect virtuous leaders. He said that if they are lacking in experience, training, proven virtue, and demonstrated wisdom, they're not fit for the task. And so his idea was that we should train up the youth to do that, because so many of the adults don't know that, and they can't be just as good, honest, and wise. A lot of times we elect people that are good, and maybe they're honest, but are they wise? Do they know the foundations of the principles of liberty? Do they know that we need to be having our laws on the basis of loving of God and loving of men? Do they know that? That's what I think I would say wisdom is. Okay, now let's see. I wanted to go to Proverbs 29. Let's see if I can find it. If you have a Bible here, that'd be way cool. Does anybody have one by chance? Awesome. Would you read that? Chapter 29, and it's verse... Proverbs, yes, Proverbs. You know, Proverbs is the famous one that says, train up a child in the way he shall go, and when he is old he shall not depart from it. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 2. It's on page 842 in my edition. And this is an illustration of, let's see, I guess leadership. I'm not sure. I didn't write that in my notes. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 2. Do you have it? Would you read it loud?
When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn.
Okay, I've had that in my mind a lot. As I was running, I thought about that a lot, but I didn't know where it was till I researched for this presentation. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. And you kids are going to see, as we progress down farther on this road to eliminating God from our schools and from our consciousness and from our respect and honor, that we are going to mourn more and more, and our freedoms are going to be taken more and more away from us. Let's see, let me just mention a couple more things. John Adams thought it was the duty of us all to be virtuous enough that we could be elected to public office. He also thought that the public servants should do it as a service, not as a calling. He thought that they shouldn't even have a recompense, a salary. And I know that George Washington, as the leader of our troops in the Revolutionary War, did not accept a salary, nor did he as he was first president. And Benjamin Franklin thought that was wise. And they thought if they should have a salary, it should be very minimal, so that you would never have someone who was looking for avarice and greed and power be your rulers. You should only have those who would do it as a public service because they loved their country and they loved their God so much. And I thought that was really interesting. And he said it should not be an occupation, but it should be a service. And I'll read you what I found in this great book from Benjamin Franklin on that. He said, page 71, as every free man to preserve his independence, if he is not a sufficient estate, ought to have some profession, calling, trade, or farm whereby he may honestly subsist, there can be no necessity for, nor use in, establishing offices for profit, the usual effects of which are dependence and servility, unbecoming free men, in the possessors and expectants, faction, contention, corruption, and disorder among the people. Wherefore, whenever an office, through increase of fees or otherwise, becomes so profitable as to occasion many to apply for it, the profits ought to be lessened by the legislature. So isn't that interesting? Benjamin Franklin had a lot of great ideas. Okay, the fourth principle, I really didn't expect to go into the fourth principle, but I found that I sort of really was after I looked at this in detail. And if you want to repeat these principles, be sure to go ahead and do that. But the fourth principle I just wanted to deal a little bit with is without religion, the government of a free people cannot be maintained. And basically it's saying the same thing, only it's adding the word religion instead of just being virtuous. And we're not taught this, but the founding fathers were so religious, and they were many of them were Christians, some were not, some were didn't belong to any religion. Some were students of spiritual ideas, but they didn't attach themselves to any denomination or even just Christianity. And so I think that it's not widely known that they thought that the principles of religion would be paramount to keeping a religion free. And if you've studied anything about separation of state and how we've twisted that around now, that their intention was not to separate religion from government. It was to separate government from religion. In other words, government, especially in their case the federal government, would not have any say in establishing a church. Even, they said denomination, but even Christianity, even though they believed that we should honor God and Jesus Christ. Many of them actually stated that Jesus Christ was the foundation of our liberty and that we should honor him. But they did believe that we should allow all religions to be able to be freely expressed. There are 5 points that Benjamin Franklin taught. He says the 5 points of fundamental religious belief, and this would probably be an overarching religious belief over all religions. And by the way, the founding fathers agreed on all these points. They disagreed in many other points, but they were usually in the application of how you should put these things into practice. But they agreed on the basic religious beliefs. And the one is, in fact, let me write these down. These are basic religious beliefs that they thought should stay in government. Okay, so religious beliefs that they thought we should always keep. One was that there was a creator. There exists a creator who made all things. Okay, they all agreed on that. Now, I really don't know, as I haven't studied the religion of Islam, but I believe that they think that Allah, which is the way they say it, would be God, their father, and probably a creator. Does anybody know more about that? I don't, but anyway, you can look that up if you want to. But they believe that there would be a creator, and I think that all religions who they would consider religious would believe that way, and that they should recognize and worship him. Number 2, they believe that the creator has revealed to us a moral code that we should abide by. There's a moral code of behavior for happy living which distinguishes right from wrong. The third thing that they all agreed on that they thought we should keep in government was that the Creator holds mankind, let me write it this way, Creator holds mankind accountable. They thought that you're going to be able to, or you're going to have to be accountable for your deeds. And what do we do today? We say, well, if you can get away with it, who cares? Okay. Number 4, the fourth principle that they agreed on that we should keep in our government is that all mankind live beyond this life. So there's a life beyond life. And that's when we would be held accountable for our actions. The 5th principle that they all agreed on was in the next life men are to be judged for their conduct. Okay, so there will be a judgment. Okay, so we will be held accountable for that. Now, I just wanted to take a few more minutes here and look at some things that are happening in our society today that are contrary to those beliefs. First of all, before I do that, does anybody get the publication from the National Center for Constitutional Studies? Oh, the recent one, I really like Mr. Taylor. He's great. They have looked at all the biblical references and all the roots of the Declaration of Independence that came from the Bible. Have you looked that over? I'll just take one of these. Do you recognize this? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Where's that from? Declaration of Independence. Okay, listen to this scripture. Psalms 19:1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth his handiwork. In other words, God created us. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Okay, isn't that what we just said, what I wrote from the Declaration, or what I read from the Declaration of Independence? Listen to this, Leviticus chapter 24, verse 22. Ye shall have one manner of law, as well for the stranger as for one of your own country. For I am the Lord your God. Listen to this one, Romans chapter 2, verse 11. For there is no respect of persons with God. Okay, going back to what I read about from the Declaration. Genesis 9, verse 6. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. Exodus 20 is one of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not steal. And on and on and on. There's a whole 4 or 5 pages that list the roots of truths that were written in the Declaration of Independence from the Bible. Okay, now, I have a magazine here that I was studying because I was really interested in the Idaho Falls voting in the non-discrimination ordinance. There were 3 basic planks of that ordinance. I think that one had to do with employment, which means that now we have to force employers to hire a gay person. So that's forcing an employer to do that. The other one was forcing someone to house or put up in a hotel a gay person. Let's see, how was it? It was employment and what was that? Or was that the third plank? I'm getting kind of mixed up here. Employment and I guess housing. Yeah, but there was a third plank. Idaho Falls passed those two planks of the non-discrimination ordinance. And though we believe that we should treat all men the way we would like to be treated, is it right for us to force an employer to hire someone? Well, there are 29 instances of where, there's probably many more, but there are 29 documented instances of where we have not allowed our love and respect of God and His laws to be preeminent in our area. I was just astonished to find this out when I decided to run. There are 29 instances where people who have decided that it was against their beliefs and that it was not government's prerogative to force them to hire or fire or not hire or not fire or rent to. That's what renting or basically renting to someone. That it's not in the government's, it's not in their prerogative. It's a freedom of assembly. It's a freedom of association that would go against someone's decision to hire whomever they want to. And we passed that. And there was a third plank that was that they called the what was it? I'm looking for the word. Yes.
I can't remember the word either, but allowed them to go to either bathroom.
Oh yes, the accommodations, public accommodations. Thank you very much. Well, in California, it's become a law, and now they allow boys and girls showers and restrooms if they say that they're a girl. Yes.
My sister-in-law was in California during the summer, and they were shopping, and she went to one store and she was in the bathroom, and there was a man in there, who was deciding he was not a man. And it was rather shocking. So they went to the next store, and she noticed that man come in the store and go straight for the women's bathroom. Oh. And so she went in there, and he was, exposing himself to young girls and stuff.
Oh my goodness!
And so it was, this is a problem.
This is going to be a problem,
right?
And it's going to be a problem here. We think, oh, well, that's California, it won't come here. Guess what? It's already here. And I think sometimes we have our people in government say, well, that's not happened yet. That's their main excuse a lot of times. Well, I listened to the debate from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock this afternoon over in Boise. Was anybody else online with that by chance? But they had a debate on Common Core and how it's going to affect even homeschooled kids, because the the GED test and the SAT and the ISAT, or the SAT and the ACT will be changed so that it reflects the values that are being put into the Common Core curriculums. Well, it's coming there too. I forgot what my point was. It's here. And oh, one of the points that was made by Superintendent Luna was, well, that hasn't happened yet, and we don't intend to collect that kind of data on your student, like the religion of your parents or your persuasion politically. Oh, well, we don't intend to do that. Oh, well, that hasn't happened yet. I always get a kick out of that when I hear that, because that doesn't mean that it doesn't, we haven't opened the door. Idaho Falls has opened the door, and the third thing that will become an issue this time will be this issue of whether you can allow a transgender person to use the restroom or some public accommodations of the opposite sex. I just wanted to give you some of the cases. You probably have heard of these, but a lot of us don't know the details. In New Jersey, there were 2 lesbians who wanted to hold their commitment ceremony at the pavilion of the Ocean Grove Camp Meeting Association, which was owned by a Methodist church. And they refused that because they didn't want their name, I guess, to be on that. They felt like it was against their religion. So, let's see, much like the Catholic Adoption Agency was pushed into closure by those policies, Ocean Grove had to pull out of the wedding hosting business so as to not be forced to become a part of celebrating homosexual unions condemned by the Bible, which is the way they felt. There's a bed and breakfast owner in Hawaii, and she, in her opinion, it was in her best interest for her business not to allow a same-sex couple to be overnight in her accommodations, and so she didn't allow it. Well, the Hawaii First Circuit Court judge ruled on April 11th that the owner of this bed and breakfast estate violated state law when she told them that they couldn't stay in her home, and it was ordered from now on to provide a room to any same-sex couple that wishes to stay there. Okay, there's another example of a bakery. You probably know about the company called Sweet Cakes by Melissa. It's in Oregon. They became the targets of a state investigation because they didn't want their company to be known as making cakes for that kind of a wedding. So they ultimately decided to shut down their storefront operation to evade potential prosecution. And it's interesting that even some of the people who are against or who are pro-homosexual recognize that some of our rights are being violated. And they have actually come out in support of the people who fight to keep their religious rights sacred and their freedom of association. I thought that was very interesting. There are 29 examples of how the government is forcing this kind of thing rather than allowing us to be a virtuous and moral and religious people the way we deem proper in our society. So I just think that we a lot of times are not aware of things like this, and we are not aware of the fact that we need to become more educated than we think. We really need to rise up. We need to study the books that are for us, like this one. We need to study our Constitution. We need to become active. We need to become educated so that we can not only elect people who are good, honest, and wise, but also hold their feet to the fire when they start to do things that are not according to the principles that we know are true. And I would like to witness to you that I know from my experience running for the City Council that I have learned for myself that at least the principles I've studied, and there may be more, are true. And that the Founding Fathers were wise, good, noble men. They have been vilified and destroyed their reputations, but I know that they were called by an all-wise Creator who raised them up for a wise purpose. And he knew they were smart, intelligent. He knew they would study. He knew they would put together the foundations of a government that could be free for people so that the gospel of Jesus Christ could be preached. And I leave this witness with you as a testimony that the things that you are doing are good, and that goodness and virtue will win in the end, that they're the things that an all-wise Creator wants for us, and that you are on the right track. May the force be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Wow, does that make you feel like yeah, we're so happy to be here and be learning these principles so we can go out and share it with our friends. And we can run for city council.
Everyone should try it.
And learn from the experience. Okay, we're going to take about a 5-minute break so people can run to the restroom, and there's a water down there. So we're going to